Grandfather Paradox. Imagine a scenario where time travel is possible and you have a time machine. You decide to travel back in time to meet your grandfather when he was a young man. However, things take a dramatic turn. While you're in the past, you accidentally prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. This means your parents were never born, and consequently, you were never born. Here's the twist. If you were never born, how could you have traveled back in time to prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother? If you never existed, you couldn't have gone back in time to create this situation in the first place. This creates a logical contradiction because your actions in the past seem to negate your own existence. This is known as the Grandfather Paradox. It's a classic problem in discussions about time travel and causality. The paradox challenges our understanding of cause and effect, and it raises questions about the consistency of time and the possibility of altering the past. To visualize this paradox, think of it like this. If you could go back and change events in a way that prevents your own existence, you create a situation where you shouldn't have been able to make those changes. This creates a paradox where the cause, your time travel, contradicts the effect, your existence. The Grandfather Paradox is not just a theoretical puzzle. It has significant implications for our understanding of time travel. If such time travel were possible, it could lead to contradictions and complex issues regarding causality and the flow of time. The Grandfather Paradox leads to intriguing questions about the nature of time and reality. If time travel to the past could result in such paradoxes, what does this mean for the possibility of traveling back in time? One common response to the paradox involves the concept of parallel universes, or alternate timelines. According to this theory, if you were to travel back in time and alter events, you would create a new parallel timeline where the changes take place. In this new timeline, your actions would have prevented your own existence in that specific timeline, but it wouldn't affect the original timeline you came from. In this way, the Grandfather Paradox is resolved by suggesting that time travel creates branching timelines rather than altering a single, fixed timeline. Each timeline remains consistent within its own context, avoiding contradictions by separating the changes into different realities. Another approach to addressing the paradox is the idea of time loops or closed time-like curves. This theory suggests that events in the past are part of a closed loop, meaning that any actions you take when traveling back in time are already accounted for in the timeline. Essentially, you might find that you cannot change significant events in the past because they are already integrated into the timeline. In this view, the paradox is resolved by the idea that the timeline is self-consistent. Your actions, even if they seem to contradict the possibility of your existence, are part of a larger, unchangeable loop of events that doesn't allow for contradictions. The Grandfather Paradox also prompts discussions about the limitations of our understanding of time and causality. It challenges our intuitive notions of cause and effect and forces us to reconsider how we think about the flow of time and the possibility of altering past events. The Grandfather Paradox is more than just a philosophical puzzle. It has implications for various fields, including physics, philosophy, and even popular culture. The paradox stimulates discussions about the nature of time, causality, and the feasibility of time travel. In physics, the paradox raises questions about the consistency of physical laws and the possibility of time travel. While many theories, such as Einstein's theory of relativity, allow for the theoretical possibility of time travel, they also imply constraints that could prevent paradoxes like the Grandfather Paradox from occurring. For example, some physicists argue that certain conditions, such as the need for infinite energy or closed time-like curves, may prevent paradoxical scenarios. Philosophically, the paradox challenges our understanding of determinism and free will. If time travel were possible, it could lead to questions about whether our actions are predetermined or whether we have the freedom to alter the course of events. The paradox forces us to grapple with the implications of altering past events and the potential consequences for our understanding of reality. In popular culture, the Grandfather Paradox has inspired numerous works of fiction, from novels to movies, exploring the complexities and consequences of time travel. These fictional portrayals often play with the paradox in creative ways, highlighting the challenges and potential solutions to time travel dilemmas. Looking ahead, the grandfather paradox remains a valuable thought experiment for exploring the boundaries of our understanding of time and reality. While time travel remains a theoretical concept, the paradox provides insights into the challenges and limitations that would arise if such phenomena were possible. In summary, the grandfather paradox is a compelling puzzle that prompts us to reconsider our notions of time, causality, and the nature of reality. By examining the paradox and its implications, we gain a deeper understanding of the complexities associated with time travel and the broader philosophical questions it raises. Schrödinger's cat paradox. A cat locked in a box is both alive and dead at the same time. How is that possible? This is the thought experiment at the heart of Schrödinger's cat, one of the most famous paradoxes in physics. It challenges how we understand reality, observation, and the strange rules of the quantum world. But don't worry, no cats were harmed in the making of this paradox. It's not about actual feline cruelty. It's about unraveling the mysteries of existence. The story starts in 1935, when Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger devised the experiment to highlight what he saw as the bizarre and unsettling implications of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the branch of physics that deals with the very small, the particles that make up atoms. At this microscopic level, the rules of reality behave very differently from what we experience in our everyday lives. To explain this, let's set the stage for Schrödinger's cat. Imagine a sealed box containing a cat, a radioactive atom, a Geiger counter, and a vial of poison. The setup works like this. If the radioactive atom decays, the Geiger counter detects it, triggering the release of the poison, which kills the cat. If the atom does not decay, the poison is never released, and the cat remains alive. The twist is that according to quantum mechanics, the atom exists in a state of superposition. It has both decayed and not decayed at the same time. And because the atom's state determines the fate of the cat too is in a state of superposition, both alive and dead at once. This seems absurd, doesn't it? How can the cat be both alive and dead? Schrödinger's thought experiment wasn't meant to explain quantum mechanics. It was meant to criticize it. He wanted to show how strange and counterintuitive the implications of quantum theory could be when applied to everyday objects. At the heart of the paradox is the idea that in the quantum world, particles don't exist in definite states until they are observed. Before you open the box and check on the cat, it exists in both states simultaneously, alive and dead. The act of observation forces the cat into one state or the other, collapsing the superposition. This idea is known as the Copenhagen interpretation, one of the most widely accepted interpretations of quantum mechanics. It suggests that reality at the quantum level isn't fixed until it's observed. In other words, observation creates reality. But Schrödinger's cat forces us to confront just how strange this idea really is. If observation determines reality, then what counts as an observation? Does it have to be a conscious human observer, or could the Geiger counter itself count as an observation? And if observation creates reality, what does that say about the nature of reality itself? The paradox also raises deep philosophical questions. What does it mean for something to exist in two states at once? In everyday life, things are either one way or the other. A light is on or off, a door is open or closed. But in the quantum world, things can exist in a state of both and rather than either or. This challenges our intuitive understanding of how the world works, forcing us to think in entirely new ways. Schrödinger's cat also highlights the problem of scale in quantum mechanics. At the level of atoms and particles, superposition makes sense, and experiments have shown that it's real. But at the level of cats, people, or planets, things seem to behave differently. This disconnect between the quantum world and the everyday world is one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in physics. How do the strange rules of quantum mechanics give rise to the familiar rules of classical physics? The cat-in-the-box paradox sits at the center of this question. Interestingly, there are other interpretations of quantum mechanics that offer different explanations. For example, the many worlds interpretation suggests that when you open the box, the universe splits into two. In one universe, the cat is alive. In the other, the cat is dead. In this view, superposition isn't about the cat being both alive and dead in the same universe. It's about the existence of parallel universes where every possible outcome is realized. Another interpretation, known as quantum decoherence, suggests that superposition is disrupted by interaction with the environment. In this view, the cat isn't truly alive and dead at the same time. It's just that our inability to measure the quantum interactions creates the illusion of superposition. These interpretations show that Schrödinger's cat isn't just a paradox. It's a doorway into some of the most profound questions about reality, time, and existence. Schrödinger's cat also has practical implications. Quantum mechanics isn't just theoretical. It underpins much of modern technology, from semiconductors to quantum computers. Quantum superposition, the very concept behind the cat paradox, is what allows quantum computers to perform calculations far beyond the capabilities of classical machines. Understanding these principles isn't just a philosophical exercise. It's the foundation of technological progress. In the end, Schrödinger's cat is more than just a quirky thought experiment. It's a profound exploration of the mysteries of reality. It challenges us to think beyond our everyday experiences and confront the strange, counterintuitive rules of the quantum world. And perhaps its greatest lesson is that reality, at its deepest level, may be far stranger and more complex than we ever imagined. So the next time you think of Schrödinger's cat, remember, it's not just a paradox. It's a reminder that the universe still has secrets waiting to be uncovered. Fermi Paradox. The universe is vast, so vast that it contains hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, many of which have planets orbiting them. Given the sheer numbers, it seems almost certain that intelligent life must exist somewhere else in the cosmos. And yet, despite decades of searching, we've found no evidence of aliens, no signals, no spacecraft, no traces of advanced civilizations. This puzzling contradiction is the Fermi Paradox, one of the most intriguing questions humanity has ever faced. If the universe is so big, where is everyone? The paradox gets its name from physicist Enrico Fermi, who casually asked this question during a lunch conversation in 1950. The math seems to demand that intelligent life should be out there. With so many stars and planets, even if life arises on only a tiny fraction of them, there should still be millions, if not billions, of civilizations in our galaxy alone. And if even a small number of these civilizations are capable of interstellar travel, they should have spread across the galaxy by now. So why haven't we seen any evidence? One explanation is that intelligent civilizations might be exceedingly rare. While the ingredients for life, water, carbon, energy, are abundant, the leap from simple molecules to complex organisms and then to intelligent beings may be so unlikely that it has only happened here on Earth. In this view, humanity might be a cosmic fluke, the result of an extraordinarily improbable sequence of events. Another possibility is that intelligent civilizations do exist, but they're too far away for us to detect. The scale of the universe is almost incomprehensible. Even at the speed of light, it would take over 100,000 years to cross our galaxy. If alien civilizations are scattered across such immense distances, their signals, if they're sending any, may not have reached us yet, or we may not yet have the technology to detect them. But what if alien civilizations are nearby and we still don't see them? This leads to another possibility. They might not want to be found. Just as humans are careful about revealing their location in the wild, perhaps advanced civilizations are deliberately keeping quiet, either out of fear of attracting hostile attention or out of a philosophical belief in non-interference. This is sometimes called the zoo hypothesis, the idea that Earth is like an exhibit in a cosmic zoo, observed but left undisturbed. There's also the unsettling possibility that civilizations self-destruct, crushed before they can make meaningful contact. Advanced technology brings incredible power, but also enormous risks, from nuclear weapons to environmental collapse to artificial intelligence. If intelligent life tends to destroy itself shortly after reaching technological maturity, the galaxy might be littered with the ruins of once thriving civilizations. Another explanation involves the limits of our own perception. What if alien life exists but is so different from us that we don't recognize it? We tend to imagine aliens as humanoid beings or civilizations that communicate using radio signals, but life elsewhere could be fundamentally unlike anything we've ever conceived. It might exist in forms we can't detect or in dimensions we can't perceive. They might even be here, but we simply lack the ability to notice them. The Fermi Paradox forces us to confront not only the vastness of the universe, but also the fragility of our assumptions. It's easy to imagine ourselves as the center of the story, but the universe is under no obligation to conform to our expectations. Whether intelligent life is rare, distant, hidden, or extinct, each explanation challenges how we see ourselves and our place in the cosmos. Some thinkers suggest the paradox has a more mundane resolution. Perhaps we simply haven't been looking for long enough or in the right ways. Modern technology has only allowed us to scan for extraterrestrial signals for a few decades, a blink of an eye on cosmic timescales. The search for intelligent life may require centuries of effort before yielding results. In this view, the Fermi Paradox isn't a mystery. It's a reminder to be patient. Others take an even more radical approach, suggesting that the absence of evidence may itself be evidence of something profound. If the universe appears silent and empty, perhaps it's trying to tell us something about the nature of life, intelligence, or the laws of physics. Some theories propose that the very conditions needed to support life might make it inherently rare or fleeting, a fleeting spark in an otherwise indifferent cosmos. The Fermi Paradox doesn't just ask where the aliens are. It asks what their absence means for us. If we are truly alone, it places an extraordinary responsibility on humanity. It means that the future of intelligent life in the universe rests entirely on our shoulders. It challenges us to take better care of our planet, to protect and preserve the fragile conditions that make life possible, and to think deeply about how we might one day represent ourselves to the cosmos. Ultimately, the Fermi Paradox remains unresolved, and that's what makes it so compelling. It invites us to ask the biggest questions about existence, from the origins of life to the fate of civilizations. And while the answers may be elusive, the search itself has the power to unite us, not just as a species, but as beings capable of curiosity, imagination, and hope. Bootstrap Paradox. Imagine receiving a book filled with revolutionary ideas, only to discover that it was written by you, except you haven't written it yet. Now imagine you travel back in time and give this book to your younger self. Your younger self uses it to write the book in the future. The question is, where did the book actually come from? This is the Bootstrap Paradox, one of the most mind-bending concepts in time travel, where an object or piece of information exists without any clear point of origin. It loops endlessly through time, defying our understanding of cause and effect. The Bootstrap Paradox is named after the idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, a phrase meant to describe something that seems impossible. In this paradox, something creates itself. It exists because it was sent back in time, but its origin remains a mystery. It's a paradox that forces us to question the very nature of time, causality, and reality. To make it simpler, let's break it down with a classic example. Imagine a scientist in the future invents a time machine. They travel back in time and meet their younger self, giving them the detailed blueprints for building the time machine. The younger self uses these blueprints to build the machine and eventually grows up to become the same scientist who travels back in time. But here's the problem. Where did the original idea for the time machine come from? It wasn't invented. It was simply passed around in an endless loop. The machine exists, but it has no true beginning. This paradox challenges one of our most fundamental assumptions about reality, that every effect must have a cause. In the Bootstrap Paradox, the cause and effect are tangled in such a way that they become indistinguishable. The time machine exists, but its origin is stuck in a loop, forever recycling itself. What makes the Bootstrap Paradox so fascinating is that it's not just a thought experiment. It has implications for how we understand time and causality. In our everyday experience, time flows in one direction, from past to present to future. Cause leads to effect, and actions have consequences. But in a time travel scenario, these rules break down. The past can influence the future, but the future can also influence the past, creating a feedback loop where the origin of events becomes impossible to trace. Philosophically, the Bootstrap Paradox raises profound questions about free will and determinism. If the blueprints for the time machine have no origin, does that mean the scientist's actions are predetermined by the loop? Or is the paradox itself a demonstration of how free will can exist outside of linear causality? The paradox forces us to confront the possibility that time isn't as straightforward as it seems, that it might be a much more flexible and interconnected phenomenon. Science fiction often explores the Bootstrap Paradox in creative ways. One famous example is the movie Terminator. In the film, a character travels back in time to protect a future leader, but in doing so, becomes part of the events that lead to that leader's rise. Another example is the classic time travel novel, The Time Traveler's Wife, which plays with the idea of a self-contained loop in which events happen because they've already happened. These stories highlight the paradox's strange and captivating nature, inviting us to imagine a reality where time is anything but linear. From a scientific perspective, the Bootstrap Paradox is tied to theories about time travel, particularly in the context of general relativity. Einstein's equations allow for the possibility of closed time-like curves, essentially loops in space-time where events can circle back on themselves. While this idea remains theoretical, it suggests that the paradox might not just be a product of imagination, but a potential feature of the universe itself. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The Bootstrap Paradox isn't just about time travel. It's about information and causality. Imagine a piece of information, like a scientific formula or a historical event, that exists solely because it was sent back in time. Who created it? If the information has no origin, does it really exist? This idea challenges our understanding of knowledge and creation, blurring the lines between what is real and what is merely a product of the loop. The Bootstrap Paradox also has profound implications for how we think about the universe as a whole. If time can loop back on itself, it raises the possibility that the universe itself might be a self-contained system with no clear beginning or end. In this view, the Big Bang might not be the start of everything, but just one part of a larger, cyclical process. The paradox forces us to question whether anything truly has an origin, or if everything is part of an interconnected web of cause and effect. So is the Bootstrap Paradox solvable? Not within the framework of linear time and causality as we currently understand them. The paradox exists precisely because it defies resolution, challenging us to think beyond our normal assumptions about time and logic. It's not a problem to be solved, but a question to be explored, a doorway into a deeper understanding of the mysteries of time, causality, and existence. The Bootstrap Paradox reminds us that the universe is far stranger and more complex than we often realize. It invites us to imagine realities where beginnings and endings blur, where cause and effect intertwine, and where time itself bends in ways that defy comprehension. And perhaps that's the most profound lesson of the paradox, that even in a world bound by logic and rules, there will always be mysteries that leave us wondering, paradoxes that push us to question, to explore, and to dream. Ship of Theseus. If you replaced every part of a ship over time, its planks, its sails, its wheel, until none of the original parts remained, would it still be the same ship? This question, known as the Ship of Theseus, is one of the most enduring and puzzling paradoxes of all time. It doesn't just challenge how we think about objects, it forces us to question the very nature of identity itself. What makes something what it is? Is it the material it's made of, the way it's put together, or something more abstract? Imagine a ship docked in a harbor. Over the years, parts of it begin to rot and wear out. First, the crew replaces a few planks, then a mast, then another plank, until eventually every single piece of the ship has been replaced. It still sails the seas, carries its crew, and looks like the same ship. But is it? And if it isn't, when did it stop being the ship of Theseus? Was it after one plank was replaced, or 10, or all of them? Now, let's complicate the question even further. Suppose someone gathers all the old discarded pieces of the original ship and uses them to reconstruct it elsewhere, which is now the true ship of Theseus, the one rebuilt from its original parts, or the one that has been continuously maintained and updated, or are they both, in some strange way, the same ship? This paradox doesn't offer easy answers. It leaves us tangled in questions about what identity truly means. The ship of Theseus isn't just a thought experiment about ships. It's a metaphor for everything in life that changes over time. Think about yourself. The cells in your body are constantly dying and regenerating. By the time you've lived a few decades, most of the cells you were born with have been replaced. Are you still the same person? If so, what makes you you? Is it your memories, your personality, or something deeper and less tangible? The paradox also forces us to consider the nature of objects around us. If you own an old car and gradually replace every part, is it still the same car? Created with time to buy room. The ship of Theseus reveals that our concept of identity is far more fluid than we often realize. It shows that the things we think of as fixed and permanent are actually in a constant state of change. Philosophers have grappled with this question for centuries. Some argue that identity is tied to continuity of function or purpose. For the ship of Theseus, this would mean that as long as the ship continues to sail and fulfill its role, it remains the same ship, regardless of the materials it's made of. Others suggest that identity is tied to the material itself, that the reconstructed ship made from the original parts is the true ship of Theseus because it retains the original substance. There's also a third perspective, which challenges the idea that identity is a single, fixed thing at all. This view suggests that the ship of Theseus isn't one ship or the other, it's both. Identity in this sense isn't a matter of either or, but both and. It evolves and adapts, shaped by context and perception. In a way, the ship of Theseus forces us to confront the idea that the boundaries we draw around identity, whether for ships, objects, or ourselves, are largely artificial. The paradox also has profound implications for how we think about personal growth and change. As individuals, we are constantly evolving. Our beliefs, values, and experiences shape us over time, often in ways we don't fully recognize. If you look back at who you were 5, 10, or 20 years ago, you might feel like you're a completely different person. But are you? Or are you, like the ship of Theseus, a continuation of the same essence, carried forward through time and transformation? This paradox even extends to how we think about societies, cultures, and traditions. A city may replace its buildings, roads, and infrastructure over centuries, but it still feels like the same place. Languages evolve, losing old words and gaining new ones, yet they remain recognizable. Traditions are passed down and adapted, but they retain a sense of continuity. The ship of Theseus reminds us that identity is not about holding on to the past. It's about navigating change while preserving a sense of connection to what came before. So how do we resolve the ship of Theseus? The truth is, we don't. Like all great paradoxes, it doesn't have a definitive answer. Instead, it challenges us to think about identity in ways that are richer and more nuanced. It shows us that change doesn't erase what was, it builds on it. Whether it's a ship, a car, a city, or a person, identity is not something static or absolute. It's a process, a journey, and a story we tell ourselves. The ship of Theseus teaches us that even as we change, something essential remains. What that something is might differ depending on how we view the world, but the paradox reminds us that identity isn't a simple equation. It's a dance between the old and the new, the past and the future, the parts and the whole. And perhaps that's what makes it so life-changing, because it challenges us not just to understand identity, but to embrace the beauty of change itself. Catch-22. Paradox. You need to escape, but the only way out is to prove you're insane. However, the very act of trying to escape proves you're sane enough to stay. This is the Catch-22, a paradox that traps you in a no-win situation where every option seems to cancel itself out. It's a problem of logic, bureaucracy, and human frustration all rolled into one, and it's one of the most relatable paradoxes in modern life. The term Catch-22 comes from Joseph Heller's 1961 novel of the same name. In the book, it refers to a rule in the military. If a soldier wants to be excused from dangerous missions, they must prove they're insane. But here's the twist. If the soldier applies for an exemption, they're showing concern for their own safety, a perfectly rational act, which means they're not insane. On the other hand, if they don't apply, they're willingly putting themselves in harm's way, which might suggest insanity, but also leaves them stuck in the mission. There's no escape. The genius of the Catch-22 is how it captures the absurdity of bureaucratic logic. It's a rule that creates a closed loop, trapping anyone who tries to engage with it. And while it originated in Heller's novel, the concept of a Catch-22 is something most of us have experienced in real life. Think about job hunting. Many entry-level positions require years of experience. But how do you get experience if all the jobs that offer it demand experience to begin with? Or consider applying for credit. You need a credit history to get approved, but you can't build a credit history without getting approved first. These are modern-day Catch-22s, situations where the system feels designed to work against you. What makes the Catch-22 so frustrating is its circular nature. Every option leads you back to where you started. It's not just a matter of bad luck or tough choices, it's the system itself that creates the impossibility. You're trapped by the logic of the rule, and there's no way to break free without contradicting the rule itself. But the Catch-22 isn't just about individual frustration, it's also a reflection of larger societal and institutional problems. It reveals how rules and systems, which are supposed to help us, can sometimes become self-defeating. Bureaucracies, in particular, are notorious for creating Catch-22s. Think of a government agency requiring paperwork that's impossible to obtain without their approval, or a university insisting on prerequisites for a course that can only be fulfilled by taking the course itself. The paradox also raises deeper questions about power and control. In a Catch-22, the system holds all the cards. The individual is forced to play by rules that are inherently unfair, often with no one to appeal to. It's a stark reminder of how systems can use logic not to clarify or solve problems, but to maintain authority and keep people trapped. Philosophically, the Catch-22 challenges how we think about logic and fairness. Logic is supposed to help us make sense of the world, but the Catch-22 shows how logic can also create traps when it's applied without consideration for real-world consequences. It's a warning about what happens when we let rules take precedence over human needs and common sense. One of the reasons the Catch-22 resonates so deeply is that it's not just a theoretical problem. It's a lived experience for many people, from navigating complex bureaucracies to dealing with paradoxical social norms. The Catch-22 is a reflection of the absurdities we face every day. It's why the term has become a cultural touchstone, used to describe everything from workplace dilemmas to legal loopholes. But what can we do when faced with a Catch-22? The first step is recognizing the paradox for what it is. Sometimes, just understanding that you're dealing with a self-defeating system can help you navigate it more effectively. You might not be able to break the loop, but you can look for ways to work around it, whether that means finding alternative paths, challenging the rules, or seeking help from someone who understands the system better. The Catch-22 also reminds us of the importance of questioning the systems we live in. Why do these paradoxes exist? Are they the result of poor design, or do they serve a purpose? In many cases, Catch-22s persist because they maintain the status quo, making it harder for people to challenge authority or break free from the rules. By identifying these paradoxes and calling attention to them, we can push for changes that make systems more fair and humane. Ultimately, the Catch-22 is more than just a frustrating puzzle. It's a reflection of the human condition. It captures the tension between individual agency and systemic control, between logic and absurdity. And while it may not always have a solution, it teaches us to think critically about the rules we follow and the systems we navigate. The next time you find yourself stuck in a Catch-22, remember that you're not alone. This paradox has been baffling and frustrating people for decades, and it likely always will. But by understanding it, we can start to see the hidden dynamics at play, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to turn the system on its head. Paradox of choice. Imagine walking into an ice cream shop. You're craving something sweet and you're ready to indulge, but instead of the usual 5 or 6 flavors, you're greeted with 50 options: chocolate, vanilla, pistachio, salted caramel, mango sorbet, rocky road, and so many more. At first, you're thrilled, but as you try to decide, you start to feel overwhelmed. You second-guess yourself. What if you choose pistachio but miss out on the salted caramel? What if rocky road would have been perfect? Suddenly, what should have been a simple and joyful decision turns into a stressful, exhausting ordeal. This is the paradox of choice. The idea that while more choices may seem better, they can actually make us less happy, more anxious, and ultimately less satisfied with the decisions we make. It's a concept that challenges one of modern society's biggest assumptions, that freedom of choice is always a good thing. The paradox of choice was popularized by psychologist Barry Schwartz, who argued that having too many options can paralyze us. When faced with an overwhelming number of choices, we often struggle to make a decision at all. Think about it. How many times have you spent ages scrolling through streaming platforms, unable to pick a movie, only to end up rewatching something familiar? The more options we have, the harder it is to decide, because each choice carries the fear of missing out on something better. But the paradox doesn't stop at indecision. It also affects how satisfied we feel after we make a choice. Let's go back to the ice cream shop. You finally decide on salted caramel, but as you eat it, you can't help but wonder if you would have enjoyed pistachio more. Even if the salted caramel is delicious, your enjoyment is diminished by the nagging thought of what you might have missed. This is known as post-decision regret, and it's one of the key ways the paradox of choice undermines our happiness. One reason this happens is because of something psychologists call opportunity cost. Every time we make a choice, we're also choosing not to do something else. When there are only a few options, the opportunity cost feels small. But when there are dozens or hundreds of possibilities, the cost of what we didn't choose feels enormous. We become hyper-aware of the alternatives we gave up, and this makes it harder to fully enjoy the option we picked. Another factor at play is our own expectations. The more options we have, the higher our expectations become. If you only have 3 ice cream flavors to choose from, you might just be happy with what you get. But when there are 50, you expect the perfect flavor, the one that will blow your mind. And if the salted caramel doesn't deliver that impossible level of satisfaction, you feel disappointed, not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't perfect. The paradox of choice shows us that more options don't just give us more freedom, they also give us more room for disappointment. Interestingly, the paradox of choice doesn't affect everyone in the same way. Some people, known as maximizers, feel compelled to find the absolute best option in any situation. Maximizers are the ones who will read hundreds of reviews before buying a phone, or spend hours researching restaurants before picking a place to eat. While this thoroughness might seem like a good thing, it often leads to stress and dissatisfaction because maximizers are constantly worrying about whether they made the right choice. On the other hand, satisficers are people who aim for good enough. They make decisions quickly and don't obsess over what they might have missed, which often makes them happier and more relaxed. The paradox of choice has profound implications for how we live our lives. In today's world, we're bombarded with options: what to eat, what to wear, what to watch, where to live, who to date, what career to pursue. On the surface, this abundance of choice seems empowering, but in reality, it can lead to decision fatigue, a state where the sheer effort of choosing leaves us drained and less capable of making good decisions. So, how do we navigate the paradox of choice? One solution is to embrace the idea of good enough. Instead of obsessing over finding the perfect option, we can learn to appreciate the choices we make and let go of what we didn't choose. Another strategy is to set limits on the number of options we consider. For example, instead of endlessly scrolling through a streaming platform, we could pick from the first 5 movies we see. By simplifying our decision-making process, we reduce stress and increase satisfaction. The paradox of choice also teaches us a deeper lesson about happiness. True happiness doesn't come from having unlimited options. It comes from being present and content with the choices we make. It reminds us that freedom isn't about having endless possibilities. It's about having the clarity and confidence to choose without regret. In the end, the paradox of choice isn't just about ice cream flavors or streaming platforms. It's a reflection of how we navigate the complexity of modern life. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about freedom and happiness, and to recognize that sometimes less really is more. By understanding this paradox, we can make better decisions, find greater peace of mind, and ultimately live more fulfilling lives. Stability-Instability Paradox. Imagine a world where the more secure you try to make things, the more dangerous they become. It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But this is the essence of the Stability-Instability Paradox, a concept rooted in political science and international relations that reveals how attempts to maintain peace and stability can, paradoxically, increase the likelihood of conflict. It's a fascinating and unsettling idea that challenges our understanding of security and the delicate balance of power. The Stability-Instability Paradox emerged during the Cold War, a period defined by the tension between 2 nuclear superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Both nations possessed enough nuclear weapons to destroy each other and the world many times over. This concept of mutually assured destruction created what seemed like an ironic form of peace. After all, no rational actor would start a nuclear war knowing it would result in total annihilation. But here's where the paradox comes in. While the threat of nuclear war stabilized relations at the global level, it made smaller, localized conflicts more likely. Why? Because when 2 major powers know that full-scale war is off the table, they might feel emboldened to engage in smaller, indirect confrontations. During the Cold War, this played out in the form of proxy wars, conflicts in Vietnam, Korea, and Afghanistan, where the superpowers supported opposing sides without directly confronting each other. The very stability created by the nuclear stalemate paradoxically made these smaller wars more likely. At its core, the Stability-Instability Paradox is about incentives. When stability is maintained at the highest level, through a balance of power, deterrence, or fear of escalation, it can create a sense of security that lowers the perceived risks of smaller-scale conflicts. Actors may feel they can engage in limited aggression without triggering a catastrophic response. In this way, the paradox shows how efforts to maintain peace can unintentionally create opportunities for violence. But the paradox isn't confined to the Cold War. It has profound implications for modern geopolitics. Consider the current era of nuclear-armed states. While the doctrine of mutually assured destruction still acts as a deterrent against full-scale war, the same dynamic plays out in regional conflicts. For example, tensions between nuclear-armed neighbors like India and Pakistan have occasionally flared into skirmishes and border disputes, even as the threat of nuclear escalation looms in the background. The paradox reminds us that stability at one level can create instability at another. The Stability-Instability Paradox also applies to areas beyond warfare. Take cybersecurity, for example. As nations and organizations build increasingly secure digital systems, they inadvertently escalate the arms race with hackers and cybercriminals. The more robust the defenses, the more sophisticated the attacks become, leading to a cycle of stability at the systemic level and instability at the tactical level. Similarly, in economics, efforts to stabilize markets through regulation can sometimes create conditions for localized bubbles or crises, as actors exploit perceived safety nets. The paradox raises difficult questions about the nature of security and power. How do we balance efforts to maintain stability with the unintended consequences of those efforts? Is it possible to create a system that is both secure and flexible without encouraging the kind of instability the paradox describes? These questions have no easy answers, but they highlight the importance of thinking critically about the ripple effects of our actions. One of the most profound lessons of the Stability-Instability Paradox is the importance of humility in decision-making. It reminds us that systems, whether they're geopolitical alliances, technological networks, or economic markets, are complex and interconnected. Actions intended to solve one problem often create new ones, and the consequences of those actions can be difficult to predict. The paradox challenges us to think beyond short-term goals and consider the broader dynamics at play. It also underscores the need for communication and trust. In the context of international relations, transparency and dialogue can help mitigate the risks of miscalculation. When actors understand each other's intentions and capabilities, they're less likely to stumble into conflicts that could spiral out of control. The Stability-Instability Paradox shows us the dangers of assuming that stability is self-sustaining. It requires constant effort, cooperation, and vigilance. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the paradox is its persistence. As long as there are imbalances of power or competing interests, the dynamics it describes will continue to shape our world. The paradox forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that peace is fragile and often paradoxical in nature. It's not simply the absence of conflict, it's a delicate equilibrium that can tip into instability when pushed too far. So what can we learn from the Stability-Instability Paradox? First, it teaches us to question the assumption that stability is always a good thing. While stability can reduce the likelihood of large-scale conflict, it can also create conditions for smaller-scale aggression. Second, it challenges us to think critically about the unintended consequences of our actions, particularly in complex systems. And finally, it reminds us that true security requires more than deterrence. It requires understanding, adaptability, and a willingness to engage with uncertainty. In the end, the Stability-Instability Paradox isn't just a concept from international relations. It's a lens for understanding the complexities of human behavior, systems, and relationships. It challenges us to navigate the fine line between peace and conflict, stability and chaos, and to recognize that the answers to these challenges are rarely simple. And perhaps that's the paradox's greatest lesson, that the pursuit of stability is itself a dynamic, ever-evolving process, one that requires constant reflection, humility, and care. Simpson's paradox. Imagine two treatment options for a life-threatening disease. You're told treatment A has a higher success rate than treatment B, so you confidently choose treatment A. But later, you learn that when you break the data into subgroups, say younger and older patients, treatment B actually performs better in both groups. How can treatment B be better in every subgroup, but treatment A still has a higher overall success rate? This is Simpson's paradox, a statistical phenomenon that defies intuition and reveals the surprising ways data can mislead us. At its core, Simpson's paradox occurs when trends that appear in different groups of data disappear, or even reverse when the groups are combined. It's a paradox that challenges our understanding of statistics and forces us to rethink how we interpret information. To make this clearer, let's dive into an example. Imagine a university that is evaluating its admission rates for male and female applicants. The data shows that overall, a higher percentage of male applicants were admitted compared to female applicants, suggesting potential gender bias. But when you break the data down by departments, you discover that each department actually admitted a higher percentage of female applicants than male applicants. How is this possible? The answer lies in the composition of the data. In this scenario, the paradox occurs because women apply disproportionately to highly competitive departments with low admission rates, while men applied more often to less competitive departments with higher admission rates. When the data is aggregated, these differences skew the overall results, creating the illusion of bias against women, even though no such bias exists within individual departments. This paradox is a reminder of the dangers of oversimplifying data. It highlights the importance of context and shows how combining or aggregating data can mask important details. In the example of the university admissions, the overall numbers told one story, but the departmental breakdown told a very different one. Simpson's paradox teaches us that the way we group and analyze data can fundamentally change the conclusions we draw. The implications of Simpson's paradox go far beyond hypothetical examples. It appears in real-world scenarios across a wide range of fields, from medicine and social science to sports and public policy. For instance, in clinical trials, a treatment might seem effective when the results are aggregated but turn out to be less effective or even harmful when analyzed for specific subgroups such as age or gender. In politics, aggregated voting data can suggest trends that don't hold true within individual demographics. Even in business, marketing campaigns or product evaluations can be misleading if the data isn't analyzed carefully. The paradox also raises deeper questions about causality and decision-making. When faced with contradictory patterns in data, how do we determine which perspective is correct? Should we focus on the overall trend, or should we prioritize the subgroup analysis? The answer often depends on the context and the questions we're trying to answer. Simpson's paradox reminds us that data doesn't speak for itself. It requires interpretation, and that interpretation can be influenced by how the data is presented and understood. One of the most important lessons of Simpson's paradox is the need for critical thinking and careful analysis. In a world increasingly driven by data, it's easy to take numbers at face value, especially when they confirm our assumptions or fit a compelling narrative. But Simpson's paradox shows that data can be more complex than it appears, and that even seemingly straightforward statistics can be deceptive. This paradox also has profound implications for how we communicate data. Misleading interpretations of data can have serious consequences, from flawed medical decisions to misguided policies. Understanding Simpson's paradox can help us become more discerning consumers of information, better equipped to ask the right questions and challenge misleading conclusions. Simpson's paradox also reminds us of the importance of transparency in data analysis. When presenting data, it's essential to provide enough context and detail to allow others to understand how the data was collected, grouped, and analyzed. Aggregated results can be useful, but they should always be accompanied by a breakdown of subgroups to avoid oversimplification and misinterpretation. Philosophically, Simpson's paradox challenges us to think about the nature of truth and perception. It reveals how different perspectives on the same data can lead to conflicting conclusions, forcing us to grapple with the idea that truth is often more nuanced than we'd like to believe. It's a paradox that invites us to embrace complexity and to question our assumptions about the way the world works. In the end, Simpson's paradox isn't just a quirk of statistics. It's a powerful reminder of the importance of context, critical thinking, and curiosity. It teaches us to look beyond the surface, to dig deeper into the data, and to approach information with a healthy dose of skepticism. And in a world where data increasingly shapes our decisions, that lesson might just be one of the most life-changing paradoxes of all. Unexpected hanging paradox. A prisoner is sentenced to be hanged, but with an unusual twist. The judge announces, "You will be hanged at noon on one weekday next week, but it will be a surprise. You won't know the day of your execution until the executioner arrives." The prisoner, desperate to avoid the noose, thinks carefully and begins to analyze the situation. If the execution happens on Friday, he reasons, it won't be a surprise, because if he's still alive by Thursday evening, Friday is the only day left, so Friday is ruled out. Then, if Friday is ruled out, Thursday can't be the day either. After all, if he's alive by Wednesday night, Thursday would also be predictable. Using this same logic, the prisoner eliminates Wednesday, Tuesday, and even Monday. He concludes that the judge's statement is impossible, and he'll never be hanged. Feeling relieved, the prisoner goes to bed, confident in his reasoning. But on Wednesday, at noon, the executioner arrives, and the prisoner is hanged, completely by surprise. How is this possible? This is the unexpected hanging paradox, a thought experiment that has baffled philosophers, mathematicians, and logicians for decades. It's a paradox that plays with our understanding of logic, knowledge, and self-fulfilling reasoning. At first glance, the prisoner's reasoning seems airtight. By eliminating each day as a possibility, he concludes that the judge's statement contradicts itself. But this paradox reveals a deeper flaw in how we think about knowledge and surprise. The key lies in the prisoner's assumption that he can predict the execution by ruling out days. While his logic is internally consistent, it fails to account for the very nature of surprise. Let's break it down. The judge's promise has two parts. First, the prisoner will be hanged next week. Second, the hanging will come as a surprise. The prisoner's mistake is in treating these two conditions as if they are entirely separate. By trying to outsmart the judge, the prisoner convinces himself that the hanging can't happen at all. But this very conclusion ensures that when the execution does occur, on a day he ruled out, it will indeed be a surprise, fulfilling the judge's promise. The unexpected hanging paradox challenges our understanding of logical reasoning and prediction. It highlights the limits of deductive reasoning, especially when applied to situations involving surprise or uncertainty. The prisoner's logic works only if he assumes that his deductions can't be wrong. But the paradox exposes how his own reasoning creates the conditions for the judge's statement to hold true. This paradox has fascinated logicians because it raises profound questions about the nature of self-referential statements and the relationship between knowledge and uncertainty. It's similar to other paradoxes, like the liar paradox, where a statement like, "This sentence is false," creates a loop of contradiction. In the unexpected hanging paradox, the prisoner's reasoning becomes self-referential. He uses his predictions to try to avoid the surprise, but those very predictions ensure the surprise happens. Philosophers have debated the deeper implications of this paradox for decades. One interpretation is that it reveals the limits of human reasoning. Our logical systems rely on clear rules and assumptions, but the unexpected hanging paradox shows that even the most rigorous reasoning can break down when it encounters uncertainty or self-reference. It forces us to confront the possibility that some aspects of reality might be fundamentally unpredictable. The paradox also has connections to game theory and decision-making. In game theory, players often try to anticipate their opponent's moves, but the unexpected hanging paradox shows how overthinking and second-guessing can backfire. By trying to predict the execution, the prisoner inadvertently ensures its success. This has parallels in real life, where attempts to outsmart systems or predict outcomes can lead to unintended consequences. But the paradox isn't just a puzzle for philosophers. It has practical implications for how we think about surprise, uncertainty, and planning. It reminds us that not everything can be predicted or controlled, no matter how much we analyze or prepare. In a world filled with uncertainty, the unexpected hanging paradox teaches us to embrace the unexpected and recognize the limits of our knowledge. What's particularly striking about this paradox is its ability to create tension between logic and intuition. On the surface, the prisoner's reasoning feels flawless. Yet the moment the execution happens, we realize the flaw in his thinking. This tension between expectation and reality is what makes the paradox so compelling and so deeply unsettling. The unexpected hanging paradox forces us to confront one of life's greatest mysteries, the nature of the unknown. It challenges us to think critically about how we approach uncertainty and reminds us that even the most carefully constructed plans can be upended by the unexpected. And perhaps that's the paradox's greatest lesson, that sometimes the only certainty is surprise itself.